next speakers. So we have Nicole and Amanda that'll be presenting next. Nicole Sussex is an occupational therapist at the Family Care Team Center and was the first OT to work in family care teams in Newfoundland and Labrador. Since 2022, she has focused on building the role of OT in this area and is thrilled to now work alongside other OTs in this practice area. Amanda Moores is the occupational therapist working at the Family Care Team West Clinic. She has worked in various practice areas, including acute care, long-term care, mental health and addictions, community, and pediatrics. Amanda has been working in the Family Care Team role since March of 2024 and is excited to continue working in this role as the scope of OT and the primary health care program evolves.
Hello everybody, I'm Amanda.
I'm Nicole.
And we just want to say the layout for this presentation we got from
Oh yes, thank you to
Nicole's.
my student who was here. We actually kind of borrowed some of her layout, but we did change it because I think some of you have heard us talk, or me talk about family care teams before, but we wanted to just give a little update.
Yes, a brief update of OT and family care teams. So presentation contents, so we're going to be going over the overview of what family care teams are, the key features and roles of OT in family care teams, and then what the plans moving forward are for OT role in family care teams. And so this is a quote that we got from the CAOT paper, Occupational Therapy and Primary Care, A Vision for the Path Moving Forward by Denali and Al. And it says, one of the biggest challenges of occupational therapy's integration into primary care is that occupational therapists themselves do not always understand primary care and its philosophies. So, I mean, I can agree with that. Where I started in March, a lot of learning was learning what primary care is, and on top of that, learning what OT role in primary care looks like.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit of an overview about what the family care team is, and this comes from the Health Accord, so I know Carrie mentioned in her last presentation about the Health Accord and that being the change for the healthcare change for the future. So family care teams are a huge part of that. So it's a seamless access to multiple healthcare professionals. We work on interdisciplinary teams with the most responsible provider being either a family physician or a nurse practitioner, and then the team kind of working with those individuals. So in the teams that I and Amanda work on, there's OT, PT, social work, mental health nurse, diabetic nurse educator, clinic nurses, dietitian. That's probably it. We provide Newfoundland residents with timely access to health and social services, so primary care is often the first point of contact into the healthcare system. And then we provide continuous care, you know, they say kind of from cradle until grave, so throughout their lifespan, and then we're part of a well-connected network, so we can all work with each other as needed throughout their journey through the healthcare system. So currently, as I said, I have friends now working in the family care teams. It was just me for the first 2 years, basically. But now there is an OT at West and another OT at East. Amanda also provides coverage for the Metro Clinic. There's a new OT just started in CBN in rural Eastern, and then there's a posting, I don't know if it's up yet, but for Marystown, so stay tuned. We have one OT in Gander and Gander Bay covering the coast of bays and exploits. I think there's another posting there, it's just not filled yet. And then in Labrador, we have one in St. Anthony and two in Labrador, one in Lab City and one in Goose Bay, and they started relatively recently. No postings in Western yet, but it's not for lack of trying for all our folks from Western. I've spoken to them before, I know they've been advocating, so hopefully coming soon. So this is just a graphic that kind of gives an overview of family care teams in Newfoundland. This is when my student did this presentation almost a year ago, or like a similar presentation. I think they were at 50-something thousand residents connected to family care teams, so now we're at 60,000. This is where all of the family care teams are, and I know OTs aren't on all of those, but we're certainly trying to fight for access or advocate for access to OT services, as it is an integral part of primary care. So this is just taken from the Health Accord, and it's one of the action items: connect every resident of Newfoundland Labrador to a community team, providing a central touch point of access and a continuum of care. So the whole idea of that's brought up in the Health Accord is that everyone in Newfoundland and Labrador will have access to this allied, like the allied health part of the team, whether they're physically connected to that family care team or whether they're affiliated with it in some way or another. So that's the eventual goal. We're not quite there yet, and it's changed a lot even in the 2 years that I've been there. So it's continuously evolving and we're changing direction. But hopefully this will happen, and then everybody will have access to OT and primary care, hopefully at some point.
So this is a quote also from the same paper that I mentioned earlier, but what is the goal of OT in primary care? So the goal for occupational therapy in primary care is to offer Canadians direct and first access to OT and provide services longitudinally with the potential to serve a population of clients and follow these individuals over their lifespan. And so I think that speaks to a lot of what myself and Nicole and the other OTs are doing in our primary care teams. And it doesn't have to be, you follow them for 6 months. It could just be you see the patient once and then you might see them again 2 years down the road. We're really trying to meet the patient, where they're at and what their needs are at that time. So a very common question I've been getting is, so who do you work with? What types of people are you seeing? So this is a good slide to kind of show you exactly the types of populations that we're working with in our roles. I'm not going to go through each one individually, but it kind of goes to show quite a broad range of people that we are seeing. And then service and assessments. So again, we know what people you're seeing, but what are you doing with them? And so this is a very general overview of all the different types of services and assessments that we're providing. Myself and Nicole were looking at this slide when we were editing it, and we were like, is there anything we can take out? Because it's a bit wordy. But come to find out, we're actually doing a lot of this stuff, in our roles, and so we didn't really feel it was necessary to take something out, which I think validates, all the work that we're doing and, all the services that we can offer as OTs to the primary care team. So I thought this was a nice validation for all the work that we can do. Again, I'm not going to go through each one individually, but I think it speaks to it itself. And then groups. So group offerings is another big portion of what OTs have been working with in the primary care team. Primary care has kind of been evolving to, how can we catch as many people as we can? And so group sessions has been pretty new, I would say, since I started, a new focus for primary care. And so myself and Nicole are involved with a lot of different group initiatives. So improving sleep, talks about sleep hygiene, sleep routines, idea into action. So that's all about goal setting, educating clients on SMART goals and the stages of change. ADHD, so that's still in development by Samantha Ash and Dawn Walsh, who's the clinical lead with mental health for Janeway. And so they're in development to create a group around ADHD. And so myself and Nicole are hoping we can start to deliver that group as well in the future, because we are working with a lot of clients who live with ADHD. And then another group that I was involved with at my clinic was menopause, and so from an OT scope, I spoke about like energy conservation, sleep routines, and brain fog, memory strategies, things like that. And so that was between myself, the dietitian, a nurse practitioner, and a pharmacist. So again, very interdisciplinary in terms of what the group offerings are. And then Nicole will talk about the other groups.
Yeah, so the first 4 groups that we have there are kind of one-off education sessions that we do that are usually about 2 hours that are offered kind of on an as-needed basis, but then also offered semi-regularly. And most of the group stuff is more the prevention side of primary care. So, we do a lot of secondary prevention or reactive work with individuals, but they also wanted us to kind of switch focus to more preventative stuff. That was probably in January of this year that we kind of intentionally made that switch in focus. So involved in the ones Amanda's done as well, except for menopause, but also building social connections. So loneliness is a huge factor for a lot of individuals, especially since COVID. So we've been offering, myself and the mental health nurse have offered a group on that. We've done one on mindfulness and the importance, or the, you know, different skills that you can learn in terms of working mindfully and to practice that. Then we have also done Making Sense of Pain, is a chronic pain management. I know Sam's been involved in that with the family care team in CBN as well. But we are on our third offering of that. That's a 10-week program. And then this summer, I kind of went with the physio, and we did a 6-week balance program for seniors who maybe wanted to have more kind of not individualized group, but like in a smaller group setting, maybe couldn't access groups in the community for exercise. So we're working on balance, because we know falls are a huge challenge with seniors and can end up causing a lot of challenges for the individual. We just started a new one in the community called Healthy Aging Your Way, which was done, like it was made by Active Aging Canada. And that's a 6-week program for people over 60 to kind of just learn the different components of healthy aging. And we're doing that one at the Community Terrace, because we are trying to also integrate individuals back into their community and get more connections there. Yeah, and that's it for now. So other initiatives that we've been involved with, when I started in the beginning, I kind of got involved with every initiative I could possibly think of, because I think OT was the least understood profession in primary care. So we started a frailty group, like a committee at the beginning. So since then, that's evolved into several iterations of what we could provide for seniors over 65. So the most recent edition of that has been an older adult clinic, where we offer a clinic where each individual who comes in sees each of the interdisciplinary healthcare team members for 20 minutes. And we kind of took aspects of the Avoid Frailty framework from the Canadian Frailty Network and broke it down so that we're not asking people the same things, and we can just get a kind of overview of where people are, what services they could benefit from, what groups they could benefit from. And if there's further need for follow-up, then we would, you know, book them in for a follow-up appointment. And then from that, we would all get together afterwards and score everybody on the frailty scale, if they hadn't been already. And that kind of falls in line with the developing of the older adult pathway. So we're still in development of what kind of services we could offer to each individual over 65 on different areas of the frailty scale. So we've introduced getting everybody over 65 scored on the frailty scale, so that we can then determine what services are best for each individual. So we're still in the works of developing that with, you know, Dr. Mercer is a consultant for that from geriatric medicine. And with the new strategic health networks, there's one for aging, so I'm sure we'll be in discussion with them as well. We've also been developing family care team pathways for those experiencing chronic pain. That one's a little bit less in development, but we've really identified that people with chronic pain have a lot of needs in terms of primary health care. So how can we best service these individuals? We do have the Making Sense of Pain. We will meet with people individually, but like, what should that look like? And then we've also been involved in developing, redeveloping, changing the developmental pathways for people with mental health and primary care as well. So that's kind of evolved over time. We do offer individual, we also offer group, and then we also a lot of navigation in that area. The plans moving forward, so the affiliation agreement, that is the affiliation agreement with the fee-for-service physicians who want to kind of sign in. So then we would be offering services, the allied health part would be offering services for fee-for-service physicians and their clinics who want to avail of that. So that is just kind of in the infancy of it. We're not quite sure exactly how it will look. Hopefully it will start small and expand, but we are still kind of figuring that out. It has started a little bit with some of the pilot project people who already have like a social navigator and a clinical navigator, which is a nurse and a social worker at 3 private practice clinics. So they have been referring people in for groups, but that's kind of as far as we've gotten so far. Hopefully expansion of OT and family care teams across the province, and maybe some consistency in services that we're offering, hopefully. Continuing to adapt and modify OT services to reflect changes in healthcare landscape. So like, what will that look like when the new outpatient hub is made, and urgent care, and like, how do we fit in what we're doing in some of those landscapes? Do we need to modify what we're doing? We've recently developed kind of a community of practice group for OTs in primary care. We haven't met as a full group, but it will involve, you know, all of the OTs working in primary care, actually, not just family care teams, so including Carrie and Kathy, who also work with the harm reduction side. And then increased integration into the community. The whole idea is that we don't own everything in primary care. We need to use community resources, like Carrie was saying, it's integral in the healthcare system. We can't just do everything in healthcare. So finding those ways to integrate people back into the community and really leverage some of those resources. Sometimes there's disconnect. People just want to come get healthcare, but it's all part of the community. So any ways that we can kind of work with the community to kind of build those connections and have people connected in those ways.
That's it.
And that is it.
Thank you.
30 seconds for questions.
Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Me? Yes, I have a question. Have you, I see there's a pretty significant focus on older adults, I can see through your work, but have you had many referrals, or is there much attention paid to children?
No. When I started, I had like a list of people waiting for peds, and I quickly learned that we're not quite at that stage. There would be a lot of upskilling, well, for me in particular, who's never worked in peds. Amanda does have some experience.
I do, and you know, that was a conversation when I first started too. You know, what can our role look like for the pediatric population, but without duplicating service. Because I think that's a big thing too, is, you know, we don't want to be reinventing the wheel. So there's just been, you know, lots of conversations about what our role could look like. So it might not be seeing children, it might be more parental education, offering group sessions, things like that. So yeah, hopefully down the road there will be more involvement with the pediatric population. We just don't know what that will look like yet.
We did talk a little bit about picky eating as well, like, because we have dietitians and they're doing some of that work, so what could our role be in providing some of that education before they might get to the Janeway, or if we saw them early enough and provided that in advance, maybe they, you know, would learn the skills and it wouldn't come to that. And also,
Yeah. We could discuss.
yeah, I did at the beginning, and then everything else happened. And it was lower on the list, meeting with children. I got overwhelmed. I saw all the equipment you had, and I was like, okay, have fun with the children. But no, there's definitely a role for that. And we also thought with sensory stuff as well, like if people just had a basic understanding of sensory challenges or ways to kind of support individuals with their sensory needs, that could certainly be, you know, from a prevention perspective or understanding, for sure.
Definitely open to more communication.
Yes.
More meetings, for sure.
All the partners, please. Yep.
We've got 3 new family care positions for Lebanon, and
Yeah.
I guess the needs in each community are quite different.
Yeah.
So for the other positions that started in the province, is their day-to-day work a lot different from area to area, or is there some consistency between their typical work, or?
Like for what we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of consistency, I think, but it's probably consistency because I had to.
I was taken under her wing.
Yeah. I just showed them all the things that I had and what I was doing, and then, you know, I think that there will be evolutions, like Amanda's taken on projects that I didn't, you know, wasn't a passion project for me. Our director is amazing, and she kind of says, play to your passions, but there's kind of some consistencies across, and I think the main consistencies we really saw was mental health. We're all going to see individuals for mental health, chronic pain, and older adults, but it may diversify across different areas, and I think it probably will look a bit different rurally than it will like in a major hub, because if we see anybody that's appropriate for the Janeway, we just send them on, or, you know, if we see somebody that can avail of mental health and addictions, OT, or you know, like we have a lot more services here to refer on to. But I think it's important to really grasp, and Amanda said it nicely at the beginning, sometimes we don't know what we do. But I think the more you work in it, the more you can kind of see the lens of like what is primary care and what is probably something else. And our director really tried for us to focus on not just filling gaps, because when we first started, we were like, there's gaps everywhere. Like, who's gonna see these people and these people? We can't see the gaps everywhere. They all do come back to our clinics because we're the constant, but we have to be able to kind of carve out exactly what should be our focus primarily. But I think us meeting all together would be great, because then we could kind of divide and conquer and share all the resources that we've kind of developed over the time. And there's some great resources too. I know it's not posted on CAOT yet, but I did get in touch with Nicole Bobette, who's she worked with Catherine Donnelly, who's listed as the author for a lot of these things, and they developed OT modules for competency for primary care. So there's like, for people entering practice or students, they've developed these modules so that people have an idea of what OTs in primary care do. So they will be published on the CAOT website. She told me like it should be within the next month, but if you wanted early access, I do have them available. I can share them out. Yeah,
So
but
there
they're
are some working groups and stuff over the next year or two that like to keep this group tied together. you think?
yeah,
Okay.
That's the plan.
yeah.
Stay tuned.
Sounds good.
Next, we would like to introduce Kayla Warren, who will be speaking on autistic culture, traits the medical model overlooks, burnout, and self-advocacy. Kayla is an occupational therapist who offers services primarily to autistic and ADHD identifying teens and adults. Kayla has spent the past year working in the non-for-profit industry, developing and facilitating a life skills program for autistic teens and adults that encourages autonomy and self-advocacy, as well as facilitating social and peer support groups that allow participants to unmask and be their authentic selves. She aims to help clients understand their unique brains and sensory systems, find tools and strategies that work for them to complete meaningful activities, and reach their goals. Her approach is marked by a trauma-informed, neurodivergent affirming stance that is both evidence-based and values lived experience.
A little bit short for this podium. Yeah, so today I'm not going to talk very much about practice. I'm just going to look at some of the terms when you look at awesome friendly double empathy problem and seeing how a different model than the deficits focused one that we often see in traditional education. So I'm one autistic individual and don't represent all. In preparing for this, I use mostly gray literature sources, which is why you'll see a lot of blog posts, tweets throughout this presentation. And I also have a fair bit of privilege growing up as white settler, upper middle class background, 2 university degrees, and our OT certification gives an immense amount of privilege. And I can generally mask and not look autistic in situations that it's not safe to. I have a family doctor, health insurance, and am presumed competent. A lot of times if someone has a diagnosis, they get very infantilized. So after finishing OT school, I spent a year in a non-OT role at the Autism Society. That was a mix of life skills and peer support, and then started transitioning back into a more clinical role. I'm not sponsored by any of the content creators in this, but I make reference back to because they've done a lot of work in ensuring voices of people with intellectual disabilities, non-speakers. A lot of people who are typically left out of research are heard. And Adam did a great job yesterday of introducing the Neurodivergent Insights Learning Nook. And anything in here is what's publicly available, so you can search it up. If you have any clients that are like, this might be interesting, they're all available on our website and blog. So, autistic community looks at autistic person because it's inseparable from identity, and uses the infinity symbol, and gets rid of the functioning labels.
If you've got any client that's like, no, I prefer to say I have autism, listen to what they say. That's also part of person first, is if listening to what the person you're speaking with wants. But generally, autism is seen as a series of deficits and used as a puzzle piece, which most autistic adults not a fan of. Similarly, autism narratives are a lot of times coming from people without any lived autistic experience. It's seeing it from the outside view, and autism is treated as a tragedy or something that needs to be changed, as opposed to autistic stories look at people's lived experience, focus on inclusion and equity, and look at autism as more of a social identity, why I'm presenting on autistic culture today. So neuroplastic, I used a lot of their resources. So stimming, special interests, some people prefer passions, it depends on who you're talking to. Safe foods and sensory icks. The intersections of autistic identities, ensuring that they're in research, because throughout our education we're taught, look at this literature from a critical view, see who's included, who's excluded. And then looking at the nuances that have been pathologized in research. I don't know how to turn on the video.
I think if you click once more.
Oh, okay.
The double empathy problem. Dr. Damien Milton's theory of double empathy proposes that one group will always find it difficult to put themselves in the position of another group's experience because of their different experiences, and therefore will always find it difficult to empathize with each other. When looked at through the lens of autism, it makes the point that autistic people experience and express emotions, communicate and interact with others, form relationships, and sense the world around us very differently to non-autistic people. It's not that autistic people don't have emotions or feel empathy, just that those things look different and are experienced differently. Those differences can make it difficult for non-autistic people to recognize the displays of emotions and empathy for what they are, because that's not how non-autistic people experience them. So they're interpreted incorrectly. If autistic people lack insight into non-autistic culture and social communication, it stands to reason that non-autistic people lack insight into autistic culture and social communication, meaning it's just as difficult for non-autistic people to understand and empathize with autistic people. This mutual lack of insight creates an empathy gap, a problem for both groups, a double problem. How it presents. The non-autistic ways of communicating and empathizing are seen as the typical, expected ways. They're generally accepted as normal and correct. They're mainstream. The atypical, unexpected presentations of autistic communication and empathy are often rejected as different and incorrect. They're pathologized as wrong. So, while the empathy gap is experienced by both groups, there is inequality to the level of the impacts it has on both groups. For non-autistic people, there is an assumption that their majority, familiar way of communicating and empathizing is superior or preferable to the autistic way, and so the majority gets its way. Underpinning that is the misconception that autistic people are non-autistic people who have broken autistic bits that should be overcome or improved. It's created the expectation that autistic people must learn non-autistic culture and ways of communicating and empathizing in order to be accepted into society. To reinforce this, behavioural trainings and frameworks based on rewards and punishments are often inflicted on autistic children and adults. Further, society insists on what it defines as social norms, unwritten rules that state all humans do things in a particular way, based on a non-autistic experience of the world. Autistic people are applauded and rewarded for not showing outward signs of being autistic. However, at no point are non-autistic people expected to understand, accept, or adopt autistic perspectives or autistic culture. The double empathy problem highlights that all of this is evidence of non-autistic people lacking empathy for autistic people, autistic experience, and autistic culture. The current state of play. This lack of empathy from the majority of society leads to autistic people being marginalised, stigmatised, and traumatised. Society deems itself inclusive, yet basic accommodations have to be fought for or are often prescribed incorrectly. Natural autistic behaviours are pathologised. We are told that these need to be intervened with or corrected. Autistic people experience extreme levels of social isolation, interpersonal victimisation, poor mental health, poor access to healthcare, and high unemployment. Secondary to epilepsy, heart attacks, strokes, and suicide are the biggest killers of autistic people. Mental health services either exclude autistic people on the basis that poor mental health is a part of being autistic, or, conversely, lock us in mental health facilities on the basis of what is defined as challenging behaviour, ignoring the years of trauma from continuous unmet needs. Autistic people are forced to mask a lifelong developmental trauma response grounded in stigma. The double empathy problem reframes the gap between non-autistic and autistic culture. It removes the current hierarchical model, centres our coexistence on reciprocity and mutuality, and identifies autistic people as the ones with greatest insight into autistic needs and being. It provides the opportunity for autistic people to be treated with equity and equality. It also highlights that currently, hypocritically, autistic people are having to do all the work, change our innate being, and be acceptable for non-autistic people in order to access an inclusive society.
So I find that's a good way of setting the stage for explaining autistic culture. And again, it's a two-way street. Allistic, essentially non-autistic. Typically I'll talk about neurodiversity, which is more inclusive of a variety of different neurotypes. But this one's specifically focused on autism. But it's a two-way street of learning each other's different styles instead of one person doing all the work. So in this way, lived experience matters, so incorporating, now thankfully we're getting a lot more neurodivergent and autistic healthcare providers to have more input on these sayings. But speaking to people's lived experience is where a lot of this research is coming from. And just a bit here on self-diagnosis, because there are a lot of barriers to accessing formal diagnosis. Later you'll also see some reasons why people may identify as autistic but not go into it. For the most part, as an adult, there's not a lot of services even if you have a formal diagnosis, so self-diagnosed people aren't taking away from any existing services by not having a formal diagnosis. And if everyone's a little bit autistic, these traits would just be considered regular within society, not something that has to be changed. Yeah, here's just some different reasons why people may identify as autistic but not go for a diagnosis outside of the cost barrier. And red instead is a campaign, and this poster lighted up blue. And this is yellow to go with the gold infinity symbol, because AU is the element for gold. And but again, you have a client or know someone that they prefer the puzzle piece, then don't say no, you can't use the puzzle piece now. It's still what their preference is. This is just going by what the majority of the autistic community has been saying. And special interests are like oxygen. If someone's having a really down day, I know a lot of times I've seen people, you'll ask about one of their interests, and you'll see that little spark of lighting up. Safe foods are another thing, especially at times of burnout. Having your default of knowing, okay, this is comfortable, this isn't going to change. A lot of times we'll see with picky eating in kids that it's just like certain foods, they'll always go for it. The foods that are the same because it doesn't change each time, it's always the same sensory experience. And and non-speaking tends to be used more than nonverbal, because nonverbal a lot of times implies not speaking or learning. IOTO, I forget their last name, they're a big non-speaking advocate, and talks about how a lot of times someone's not speaking, they're presumed incompetent. We see this over and over, but when given means of opportunity to communicate, we can actually hear how much input they have in the world. And it's like functioning labels. Because it's either, oh, you're high functioning, you don't need any supports, you don't need any accommodations, or low functioning, you can't speak for yourself. And I don't know enough on PDA to speak about this. I just know I've talked about depathologizing. When speaking to people who identify as PDAers, they will often use the pathological demand avoidance instead of persistent drive for autonomy. It's recognized in the UK, starting to shift to North America. I'm going to skip that for now. And I'm just going to go over what it looks like in the medical model and then some of the concerns the community has brought up about it. So the differences in social communication in multiple contexts. The 3R division did make a good note on delaying identification. Because a lot of times more and more people are getting diagnosed in university once they reach the point of burnout and can no longer keep up with social demands. Repetitive patterns of interests. Monotropic is another word for this, is having that narrower range of interests and going more in depth as opposed to the typical broad range of interests. And now we're seeing mental well-being and emotional well-being being included in the areas that are impacted. And a lot of diagnoses now will come with a level instead of using the former terms like Asperger's, but they still have some of the issues in that autism is a dynamic disability. So this was a slide that I thought I was making reference to earlier on the denial of needs or presumption of incompetence. And a bit on the superpowers or overcoming, and more info on why people dislike the puzzle piece, and how autism seems to disappear at 18, or at least services for it do. Which a lot of times, not autism specific, with a lot of different disabilities, guardrailing happens with more rule of supervision, guidance or direction, and oversight, which can lead to a lot of stuff like people pleasing, poor emotional regulation. And think about it, if every time you went out, you were presumed to not have confidence. Oh, we're at this restaurant, remember, none of you, don't take any of the silverware glasses off the table. You're driving, but remember, you need both hands, so don't eat, or you might kill someone. And you're out shopping for your family. Remember, you have to cook the meat. It's the subtle statements where it comes up a lot. Similarly, disconnection from core self, which can lead to masking. And constantly having to put on, okay, who am I in this context? Who am I in this context? Who am I in this context? Some people have the safety of unmasking, other people, it's what they need to do to remain safe. But if you know much about ADHD, you've heard of rejection-sensitive dysphoria before. It's also very common in autism with the constantly going through, needing to adapt who you are, and then you get in the cycle of burnout, you can no longer do your commitments, experience rejection, and the cycle repeats itself. And trauma. A lot of times it's looking at, okay, but if you're in this situation long enough, then you'll eventually habituate. And or you constantly have to move and fit in the situation. But this just ends up perpetuating. I know the whole whole reason I went into OT was after Diana Bauman helped me find ways to adapt and meet my sensory needs as opposed to constantly trying to learn and habituate to the surrounding environments, which further dysregulated me. But a lot of times, since it's not considered a traumatic event, yeah, you're in these environments, but so is everyone else, and they're not having a reaction. It's not recognized as trauma until later. And poor mental health and increased risk of suicidality. Autism Community Training did an amazing 2-day workshop a while back looking at, it was similar to ASSIST, but looking more specifically at suicide prevention interventions in autistic adults. Highly suggest you check them out. And some stuff that the medical model overlooks, where a lot of the labels came from. I also asked in the Facebook group Autism Newfoundland Labrador, what would you like a lot of healthcare providers to know? And one of the top things I got was about functioning labels and levels, and finding ways of autism. What you can do in a day fluctuates, especially in times of burnout or depending on what environmental context you're in. There might be some situations that you might not need any accommodations to thrive. Other situations need to be adapted or a different way to do them. Plus the deficit-based model. But it's realize that people reach burnout before they're able to get a diagnosis because suddenly the mask drops. This was a really cool book. I said I wasn't going to go into practice, but this has a lot of great suggestions for writing in your documentation, having it a more strengths-based perspective while also addressing, like, this is what certain areas see, like, these might be supports that are needed in this situation, but instead of looking at it as, this is wrong, this needs to be changed, it's, these are some ways that can still affirm the autistic identity while also supporting someone. And masking, also known as camouflaging and learning from others. The amazing thing in OS recently was done on camouflaging, and it focused on the perspectives of masking and safety for autistic Black women, which I thought was an amazing addition to the literature. Alexithymia is often not taught about that difficulty recognizing emotions, to the struggling, how are you today? And it also ties into interoception and those processes, because alexithymia is nowhere near exclusive to autism, it's just more common in the autistic community. Autism Level Up does a great way of addressing this with looking at energy levels for specific emotion as opposed to specific emotions. So, for example, I'm up here presenting, I need to be at a fairly higher emotional state, even if I look amped up and fidgety. That's how I'm focusing to do this presentation. If I was here staring like this, it'd be meaning I'm zoned out and not engaged in the presentation. Plus the tacit strengths. Similarly, Kelly Maller, I call her the queen of interoception. Looking at this type of awareness, and a lot of times when you have to mask, you're avoiding those emotional states, or not being able to recognize until you're suddenly in a meltdown, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. That's a bit on self-regulation that I won't go into right now. Different experiences of pain are also very common. Chronic pain is really common in the autistic community. And with interoception, that not recognizing what's going on in my body, like on a scale of 1 to 10, what pain are you at? Jack from Autism Level Up made a good example of walking around on a broken ankle for 2 weeks because she's like, well, it's not really pain, but like I heard a crack and a snap when I was playing soccer. Then finally gets an x-ray and like, yeah, that's broken. And these are also some barriers to diagnosis. Not having insurance, the highly medicalized, marginalized groups. There's a lot of overlap with gender diversity and autism, and in some states it's starting to get viewed as, with the medicalized model of, well, you're trans, or no, you're autistic, so you can't access gender-affirming care. You don't have competence to be able to decide that. That's why the importance of self-advocates speaking out and saying, like, no, like, people deserve to have these opportunities. It might be a different process you go through for informed consent, but it shouldn't be used as an automatic exclusion. Plus, there's a lot of very common co-occurring conditions, especially people as adults when it gets to the point of burnout and support, or before you can get support. So, burnout, chronic exhaustion, reduced tolerance to stimulus, and this is a big one, that executive functioning, how suddenly, but someone was able to do skills all along, and suddenly they're really struggling with that. And some common causes: masking, people pleasing, living in an ableist world, high stress environments, significant life changes. I can't make a mistake if I get behind, I'll never catch up. And then some of the impacts. Physical health, the mental health, the ability to live independently, your ADLs, just general reduced quality of life, sustain employment or remain in school, impact on relationships. That was a good example of the I'm high functioning. My functioning labels aren't a good indicator. And then the recovery a lot of times is getting accommodations to support you in the environments, setting healthy boundaries, reducing the demands you put on yourself, being able to access support, especially autistic-oriented support, practicing self-care and learning about embracing neurodivergence. All of this is available on her website for learning more about developing a recovery plan. Because a lot of times we'll focus on immediate recovery, getting you back to being able to do your basic ADLs, but then the sustained recovery, deep recovery, is looking at making those large changes in your life. For example, for me it was, once I got out of school, to do a bit more of a deep recovery, I worked in the nonprofit, not as an OT, so I could work on doing some of that identity exploration, learning from lived experiences, and then moved back into a clinical role that's more on the evidence-based practice, and using a clinical judgment, a lot less disclosure than in a peer support setting. And it can be a long process that does not happen overnight. And the good equation is self-disclosure plus request equals self-advocacy. And it's not optimistic, it's beneficial for everyone. And especially people who are in situations that unmasking isn't safe. You don't need to say, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD. A lot of times people who are self-diagnosed or even aren't in a situation that feels safe to say, I'm autistic. It might be, I struggle with social cues, I have sensory sensitivities. You don't have to tell everyone what your medical history is. Here's a good way of some education statements that could be used. Well, I have sensory sensitivities. Can we use a seat by the window rather than a bright light? I have difficulty with auditory processing. Can we go somewhere quieter? And the two-way street of teaching self-advocacy. The Learn, Play, Thrive has done a lot of resources. But we want to ensure people can have that understanding of what their needs are, how to support them, identify situations that feel safe or where a more partial disclosure is appropriate. It might be scaffold strategies, but also we tell people to self-advocate, but neurotypicals also have to be listening. So, from us and Level Up, a lot of this might have been new of like, but I always thought like lighted up blue and puzzle pieces. Our awareness grows over time. I remember before I knew a lot of these concepts, I was always like, well, it's person first language, it's blue, and then once I got to know more about the community, I realized, okay, no, this is why things are shifting the way they are. And they have an amazing framework, plus Amy's an OT, which is pretty cool. Okay. I just threw a lot of information at you. Any questions?
Did you want to mention a bit about our working group?
Oh yeah, the ASD working group is looking at expanding the role because a lot of mental health and addictions referrals are people who are also discovering now that they're autistic or trying to seek a diagnosis, and there's not a lot currently in our system. So a working group is a great way that OTs are learning to work in a more neuroaffirming practice manner. Yeah.
What was the nonprofit you're working
Well, I was working at Autism Society of Newfoundland and Labrador, but unfortunately the funding for the Life Skills program wasn't continued this term, so fingers crossed in the future it comes back, or I can find another avenue to go about for it. Or even better, it becomes accessible in public health care without having the gatekeeping of needing a formal diagnosis.
What was the program that you mentioned that was like an assist specific to autistic adults?
It was Autism Community Training. Search up, I think it was called Mental Health, Suicide, and Autism. Lisa Morgan has a toolkit done up, and Autism BC has a lot of resources. If you search it up and see their website, there's a big framework for it.
Thank you.
Good to go. Oh yeah, Amy from Autism Level Up is the reason this is here.
I love autism level up. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Is Kara going to be presented virtually?
Yes.
So can we just write this in the chat? Yeah, well, I'll just come over and let you know it's 5 minutes, and can you just write it in the chat for her?
Kara can't see any.
Yeah. I know she asked that too. She was like, "Oh,
Kara,
I'm
you
like,
can't see
sorry.
it, so-
Hi, Kara. Can she hear us?
Oh, I can't hear you guys.
Is there a way to see her, like, from how away to where she is?
Can she see us?
She can't see, there's no webcam on
Ah,
the computer.
okay.
So,
No, just tell her Christina said hi.
See your friendly face, it's so hard to present to people when you can't see them.
Are you doing virtually or in person? They started it already. We're just waiting for Kara to hear us. I really enjoy it, but I've been in every session forever.
Test. Hello.
We can hear you. Can you hear us? Hi, Kara. All right, so I get to introduce my adorable friend, Kara Buttons. So Kara's been practicing as an OT for 20 years in not-for-profit and private pediatrics in both Alberta and Newfoundland and Labrador. Since moving back to Labrador, she's been working for the NL Health Services in mental health addictions as part of the FACT team. So Kara is also a yoga and mindfulness teacher with 15 years experience. All of these experiences have led Kara to learn that movement is an essential practice in her daily life, as well as the lives of the clients she works with. Kara lives for walks with her family, snowboarding, cross-country skiing, yoga, meditation, paddleboarding, biking, hiking, good music, good food, hot coffee, and keeping her gluten-free sourdough starter alive. So welcome, Kara.
Thank you so much for having me and asking me to be part of this wonderful day. I've been joining virtually since early this morning, and the lineup of presenters has just been fabulous. I'm honored to be part of that. It's a little strained. I can't see anyone, so it's just me and a black screen. I can share my slides, I think. Hang on. Should just be like a Zoom call. You can let me know if you can see. Yep. Little pause as I hit the blue share button. Do you guys see anything? Present now. Nothing yet. Bear with me, everybody. Yeah. Is it coming through? Good? Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to begin with a experiential exercise. So we're going to start with some movement. You've been sitting in your chairs with a bunch of breaks in between speakers today, but we're going to get up and we'll have a few minutes to check in with ourselves and see how we're doing and how we maybe move our mood through the experiential exercise. So for now, just sit up nice and tall in your chair, place your feet on the floor. If it feels safe for you to do so, you can close your eyes, and if that is uncomfortable for you for any reason, just take your gaze down towards your shoes. And we'll take a deep breath into the belly and release it with a soft sigh. We'll do that 2 more times. Deep breath into the belly, releasing with soft sigh. 1 more like that. Deep breath in and let it all go. And take note of how you're feeling in this moment. 1 word to describe your mood, energy, or how you're feeling in this particular time. And then we'll let our eyes open and we'll reach up, taking a deep breath in. And exhale and release your hands back down. Place your hands on your thighs and we'll come to our feet. Step behind your chair And give yourself a little bit of space so that you can move your arms without bumping into your neighbor. And now start to root down through your feet. We'll take a big breath in, reaching your arms overhead. Exhale breath, release the arms back down by your sides. Big breath in, reach up overhead. Now cross at the wrists and bring your palms together. And we'll inhale, lengthening up, and then exhale, lean to the right. Inhale, breath, come up through center. Exhale, breath, second side. Inhale, reach up. And then exhale, take your hands down by your sides and behind your back. Interlace your fingers. Send your knuckles towards the floor. Lift your heart towards the sky and your eyes upward. A little stretch across the front of your chest. And then we'll release the hand, taking a big breath in overhead. Now exhale as you interlace your fingers and press the palms up towards the ceiling. Inhale, reach up through the palms. And exhale, bring your palms down in front of your chest, pressing your palms forward and rounding through your upper back. And then we're going to inhale, come all the way up. Now exhale, take your left hand towards your right hip and your right hand behind the back. Inhale up through center. Exhale, twist other direction. And then we'll inhale, come all the way back up through center. And now exhale, take a step back with your right foot. And we'll take a big breath in, reaching up. Exhale, breath, bend towards the bent knee. Inhale up through center. Exhale, twist towards the bent knee. So looking over your back shoulder. Can you guys hear me?
We're doing it. Dan, you tell her we're doing it.
We don't know the difference between right and left. Can you hear me, Kara?
No, it's this mic over here.
Oh,
Black.
Kara?
Yes.
We can hear you. We're just giggling.
Okay. Perfect. We're going to talk about this in a few slides down. So this is perfect.
You keep
Let's
going.
get this mental note.
Keep going.
Okay. All right, so that was right foot back. Step forward. Let's take your left foot back. And then we'll lean towards the bent knee. Inhale up through center. Exhale, twist towards the bent knee. I'm imagining space being maybe challenging. You probably reach out and touch your neighbor. Inhale, reach up. And now exhale, step your feet back together. Release your hands down. Sit your hips back like you are sitting in an imaginary chair. Reach your arms forward. And then exhale, fold, reaching towards your toes. Your hands don't have to touch. Maybe your hands come to your thighs or your knees. Release your hands and then slowly roll up through your spine. Circling your shoulders onto your back. And then we'll come back into our mountain pose. So rooting down through the feet, growing tall through the crown of your head. And now allow your eyes to close one more time, or gaze gently towards the floor. If you're comfortable doing so, you can gather your hands in the center of your chest. And now take this moment, turning inward once again, and coming up with one word to describe how you're doing now. Notice if that word is the same or different than the first word. And if there were no words, that's okay too. And we'll take a deep breath in. Exhale with a more audible sigh. 2 more like that. Big breath in. Exhale, let it go. 1 more like that. Breathing in and breathing out. And then we'll come back to our chairs. I know my nervous system is a little more regulated. Okay, let's go back to sharing my screen. All good?
We're good.
Perfect. All right, so a little bit more about movement, moved, and the research. So we just did a little bit of an experiential exercise, really short, took 5 minutes to move. And for some of us, we maybe noticed nothing super profound. For some of us, we might be feeling like that was just what we needed. Maybe the nervous system is a little more regulated. And that might have been wildly uncomfortable for others. And so there is no, I just want to make sure that I put that out there. There's no right or wrong experience to have. It simply is your independent, valid experience. So we'll talk a little bit more about mood, movement, and the research. So this kind of came out of my work with children initially, and noticing that a big part of what they do during our session is movement, and making sure that I incorporate a little bit of movement into our sessions. And then working in mental health and addictions, and noticing how important movement became as part of my role with the FACT team as well. So when we talk about behavioral activation, where we talk about doing something different to feel something different, we're encouraging our clients and even ourselves to do the opposite action. Because when we're feeling low, the temptation is to binge on your favorite show, maybe with a pint of Haagen-Dazs and Lay's salt and vinegar chips, or at least for me, or spend hours mindlessly scrolling through social media. And what that does is that keeps us feeling low. That keeps us in that mindset. And so what the opposite action would be is to get moving. And the antidote to feeling low is clear from epidemiology and biology, and it's to just get moving. And when we're talking about moving, in terms of the research and what has been studied and that there's evidence for, it's more of physical activity. And so that can be joining a team, going for a long walk, finding a gym or a yoga studio. And there are studies that talk about hope molecules. And what the hope molecules are myokines. So when muscles contract, they secrete myokines into the blood, and researchers are calling them hope molecules. These are proteins that travel to the brain through the blood-brain barrier and act as an antidepressant, which is really exciting because more doctors are prescribing exercise as opposed to just making the recommendation for exercise. So they are prescribing that their patients engage in physical activity a few times a week to daily. So which I think is really exciting because in my mind, I think of like our muscles and our bodies containing a natural pharmacy. And we also know that movement releases neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline into our systems, all having a positive impact on the brain and ultimately our mood. Also, when people move, which is what we just noticed, is we see an increase in vocalization. And so when people get moving, people start talking, which is really important in terms of connection, as well as working with our clients and kind of getting them comfortable so that they can share with us. Dr. Kelly McGonigal is a psychologist from the US, and she talks about how exercise primes us for connection and cooperation. So when we move our bodies, we're set up with a just right state so that we can be better in our relationships, personal and work relationships. And she is saying that it also helps sensitize us to other pleasures in life. And I think an important thing to talk about as we're talking about movement and exercise is that we need to abandon this idea that the point of exercise is to improve or change some part of our bodies that we or someone else sees as unacceptable, and embrace how the movement makes us feel. So rather than looking in the mirror and expecting some sort of shape change, doing exactly what we did at the beginning of this talk and just checking in, like, how does this make me feel better in my existence? And really embracing that and letting that be the reason why we continue with the movement. So what else I came across when doing some research for this talk is that moving is great, but moving outside is even better. And so what some of the research has shown is that we've seen some really significant effects on the symptoms of being out, or the symptoms of major depressive disorder and depressive symptoms through just getting outdoors and moving your body, going for a walk in nature. And in some of the studies that I looked at on being outside, they're also talking about GPs prescribing more time outside, daily walks, and moving from a purely medical model or care to one that's best suited for the individual, where we see mixing physical activity, community engagement, and medicine when needed. So we're seeing a more holistic approach to treatment of major depressive disorder as well as depressive symptoms. And there's this really neat idea in Japan where they talk about forest bathing. And the studies out of Japan are saying that trees give off volatile essential oils that lift depression, lower blood pressure, reduce anxiety, enhance sleep, as well as improve our immune systems. And that's what's coming out of Japan. And then recently, Stuart Shanker, who is a Canadian psychologist, did some talk on this exact thing, on regulation and how important being outside is for regulation. So he talks about the nonapeptides and how they actually turn off the stress response. So physiologically, we need that to help break the stress cycle. And so that's through spending time in nature. There was one theory which I thought was really interesting. There isn't a lot of evidence to support it, but I can appreciate it. And so this one theory talked about how listening to birdsong stimulates a primal reflex in our brain. If birds are singing, there is no danger. And so this particular hypothesis, they talked about the benefits of being in actual nature and listening to actual birds singing, as well as the benefits to listening to a recording. So I thought that was really interesting. And then when we're outdoors, we're really set up to practice some mindfulness. And so having that self-regulating experience of feeling the wind on our skin or the warmth of the sun, the smell of the trees, as well as just nature in general. So moving is great, moving outdoors is even better. And I think all of this to say is really validating in the sense that this is what we always do as occupational therapists. We use movement as a means and an end. We use movement as the treatment modality as well as the goal. And we talked about the research looks at exercise primarily, but as OTs we know that movement is not just exercise. Movement is not staying still in our lives and working towards goals and working towards structure and routine in the lives of our clients. And there was a study out of Harvard Medical School in 2019 that talked about how all the little movements add up to have some positive effect on our mood. So we talked about the gold star would be 15 minutes of high intensity exercise a day, like running, or 1 hour of lower intensity, like going for a walk or doing household chores. However, they also really talked about how there is significance to little movements throughout the day and the improvement on our mood. And I think we know that from experience with our clients where, when our clients start getting back into things that bring them joy, things that give them a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, that we see their mood improve. They get more meaning out of life, they have life worth living, and so there's just more joy that comes with movement. And I think that that's a really important thing that occupational therapists can continue to support in the community, on these family care teams, on these multidisciplinary teams. This is really where our profession shines. We know the value in getting early return to work and getting people back into what brings them meaning and joy in their lives. So I really believe that occupational therapy embodies this movement principle, and I think this is where we can really help support our clients. And no matter where we're working, no matter what population we're working with, we're always working towards getting our clients moving and back into daily living. So there's the end of my presentation. I know we're on a time crunch. I don't know how we're going to do the questions exactly.
Anyone who wants to speak could come over to the line.
So Kara, I'll just ask them if they have any questions.
Really cool. That makes me happy.
Any questions?
Anybody have
We
any
have people are gonna text you.
Oh,
Just
okay.
No, I mean later.
Oh, okay.
I'll ask Christine, you have a question?
No, no question. Just tell her a great presentation for Christina.
Christina says, great presentation.
Hi, Chrissy.
Any other questions? Anything online? We're checking online, hang on.
I think we're all good.
I'm like, I gotta do this. Okay, we're all good. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here virtually.
And we'll send you a certificate in the mail. And your
Cool.
swag bag.
Ooh.
Thank
I'm
you.
dogs for sex.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Actually, we have like 10 minutes before break. I'm just gonna-
Yeah, so now we'll do a break.
Wait, am I doing it?
Oh.
Winners first.
Oh, we're gonna ask winners.
Oh, no, I was making it a surprise.
Not the script.
So we did a little draw, 3 draws actually. So Jasmine, part of the dream team with me, she brought LifeWise tote bags and a LifeWise tube. So there's, and get ready for this. The book. So we did 3 draws, 2 people, the first 2 people get these 3 things, and then the last person gets these 2 and a t-shirt from LifeWise. Okay? Woo, so nervous! Alright, so the winners are Kimberly Codner, Martina Hickey, and Jennifer Forward. So we will get all that material out to you. Now we may take a break.
Now we take a break.
Now we take a break.
Hello.
You're like, is that
All right, we're ready to get started again. I was told to say that the coloring contest has been extended until end of day. So,
Kathy?
Oh, more, they're starting.
there's time to do more, but no need to like stress color. It's supposed to be relaxing. So you have till the end of the day. All right, so Kim Doyle is our next speaker. So Kim Doyle has been the executive director with NLOTB since 2013. The executive director is the chief executive officer, CEO of the board, and is responsible for all administrative functions and duties, including the coordination of the registration and the complaints process. The ED represents NLOTB at the Association of Canadian Occupational Therapy Regulatory Organizations, or ACOTRO, board, and Kim has been the vice president of ACOTRO for 3 years. So, Kim Doyle.
Thank you, everybody. I know it's late in the afternoon, and I had Patty's and her group were after me, so I had to keep you guys well entertained before the last one. So, regulation. Remind me to change the slides, because I'm looking here. So I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about staying informed and just a few key updates on good conduct, right? That's a good one. And learning goals. You're like, good conduct, what? Quick agenda, introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about good conduct requirement. What is it that we're all supposed to be doing? And vulnerable sector screening, which is new. So we'll talk about that. And then a little bit about continuing competency and the self-assessment and learning goals requirement, which is not new, but it's going to be a new requirement, I guess, from the board's perspective. So, good conduct. That's what our mothers and fathers always told us. Just be good people. Just be good people. So as occupational therapists, as licensed healthcare professionals, we are expected to adhere to the values shared by society in general, and I guess, and specifically the values of the profession. And really to have not demonstrated any conduct that would make us unsuitable for practice. So be good, law-abiding, good citizens, basically. Good conduct is about maintaining integrity, responsibility, and trustworthiness in both personal and professional responsibilities and capacities. Good character includes the maintenance of high ethical standards, which maintains the public confidence in the profession. And I'm always very pleased to be an occupational therapist in regulation. There's not a lot of us, but occupational therapists are generally, very high standing health professionals, good people doing good work with not a lot of, crazy complaints. So it's always nice to say, oh, we're the occupational therapists. So that's always good. And sometimes nationally when I hear, go to big conferences and you hear some of the complaints, I'm like, oh God. I hope we never had to do a forensic audit of someone's, like, that would be. So what are you required to do at this point in time for good conduct? You probably do it and may or may not think of it as this, but when you apply and renew your application, you do have to make a declaration about your good conduct. You do say that you haven't been, you haven't had a criminal offense, you haven't had a charge against you, you haven't done lots of stuff. That's there, and you review that and declare that every year. You are required to immediately report to the board if you've been charged with any criminal offense, if you've been convicted of anything or pleaded guilty to anything, so that is a requirement. And also if you've been, if you've had a charge related to or an offense related to the practice of occupational therapy, and that could be in this province or in another province, that we need to know that. Also the requirement to report any conduct that affords reasonable grounds that you may not be able to practice occupational therapy in a safe manner. I often talk about that one around, sometimes we see this in regards to kind of capacity related, like a mental health issue or a life stressor or something that really can impact your ability to perform your job safely. And it's not that We all have lives, we all have stuff that happens to us, we all have times when we're not, you know, number 10, we're probably number 7, and we do our jobs quite safely and effectively. But it is our professional responsibility to make sure that we take ourselves out of situations if we are not able to do our jobs properly for a period of time. And sometimes complaints come in through the board when people are, it's health related, people are just, you know, not able to, you know, do their best stuff because stuff is happening in their lives. But that is it is a requirement. You need to report that. So, what's new? What's not new is that applicants must arrange to have a regulatory history form if you've practiced somewhere else and you're applying to practice somewhere else. That's just to make sure that, you know, you're not kind of running away from a complaint in one place and getting licensed somewhere else. So that's been a practice for a very long time. What is new in Newfoundland, in Labrador for us as OTs is having a vulnerable sector check. This is pretty much profession, industry standard. It's not something we have required. Many people have probably required it for their employer or maybe your child's sporting team or whatnot. So it's not an unfamiliar process for most people, but we will be instituting this for renewal for this year coming. So anybody from this point forward for new applicants will have to have a vulnerable sector check and then upon renewal. If you've practiced or lived outside of Canada, you will need to do an international vulnerable sector check as well. So if you can kind of figure that one out, let us know. There will be lots of information coming out to everybody about this, so don't you have to kind of remember it all right now. The process will be that current registrants will have to provide a sector check at this renewal and then every 5 years on a cycle from that point going forward. What will happen and what will the board do with a vulnerable sector check? You know, the reason we're looking for vulnerable sector check is really making sure that as protection of the public, it would be terrible for us to license somebody who had, you know, a criminal record for doing something, you know, that we didn't know about, and that something happened within our province. So we need to do our due diligence and make sure that we're doing those checks. If you have something in your conduct history that shows up, doesn't mean that you're not licensed. It means that we just need to have a look at it. Some people we're all people, we all have lives, and maybe when you were, you know, 19, something happened and you have something that might show up on a record. That's not to say, oh my God, you're done for. Not at all. It means that we will have a look at that and the registration committee will review it and look at the situation and, you know, kind of what's what. How do you obtain a vulnerable sector check? So within Canada, including Newfoundland, the vulnerable sector checks are available through the local police authority. So look at, for us, it's mostly the RNC, and then some are RCMP. The RNC, Northwest Avalon, Corner Brook Region, Lab West, and then RNC for other jurisdictions. RNC, my understanding is, not RNC, RCMP requires fingerprinting, so don't be alarmed if you see that. And again, if you live in a region that's not covered by the RNC, that's the process. So if anybody runs into trouble, certainly follow up with me. And I can't really go through that process because I don't live in an RCMP jurisdiction, so I can't make my way through it. Patty, do you have a hand up?
So I was just going to make the comment, so I've had that done several times for activities. I've never had to have a fingerprint.
Through RCMP?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent, that's good to know. Ooh, okay. That's what the information that I've read suggested, that it was fingerprinting for RCMP, but I couldn't make my way through the process, so that's good to know. Hopefully will make it easier for people.
You're also flagged like through the RNC if someone of a similar name has done something in Canada. You're flagged for fingerprint because I've done it through a different organization, and people come back and be like, I haven't used fingerprinted, and it's because you didn't do something, but someone with a similar name, similar date of birth, similar something, just like that.
That's a good point. I will make sure I include that in communications, because for some people, if you've never done this before and you look at it, it might be very scary to go, oh my God, I gotta look at that. So that's all good feedback. Okay. Time. So a little bit of general information, depending on where you live, it may take anywhere from 1 to 12 weeks or longer to get the results of the vulnerable sector check. So if people have one that they've already received, dated September 1st up until now, that's valid. We will accept one for 6 months from the renewal time, so that will backdate till September 1st. So if you have one, you can upload it to your profile and you have it done. But people will run into problems if you do it the week before renewal is done, because you won't get it back. So we'll make sure that we put that on the communications. Any questions about the vulnerable sector check and the good conduct?
So you have to receive our letter by January 30th.
No, by March 1st.
March 1st.
Yeah, so renewal, your current license expires on the end of February.
Okay, so even though the application is due January 30th,
Yeah.
the letter.
Yeah, that's before the late fee applies. So you can renew in the month of February, just pay the late fee. You have right up until the day of to actually renew.
So Kim, will you be sending out an email soon for everybody?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then NLAOT will send it 10 more times after. And people will still say that you're gonna be.
Fair enough.
For 5 years?
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years,
Yeah.
okay, so I was a new hire in like January, February 2024, and I had to submit one. Would mine still be good for 5 years, or would I have to renew mine?
Not to me.
Okay.
No, that was probably your employer. Yeah. So, so Margie, do you require them for Eastern Health?
Vulnerable sector check, but the same thing that happens is the 6 months for those people who don't have people on fire or on license.
They have.
So that 6 month time frame is a standard, so I'm assuming even when we renew again in 5 years, the same thing's gonna happen. It still has to sit within 6 months prior to the March 1st deadline.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. 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 Any other questions? And then I'm gonna jump over to continuing competency. So we get lots of questions about continuing competency, and we've been working on a program for a long time. And on the national groups that I sit on, it's a big project. We're a small group with limited resources. We have been working with the Atlantic provinces, particularly Nova Scotia, for several years now in looking at a program. So at this point in time, what's kind of coming, I guess, for this year is, as you'll notice in the continuing competency, in the competency document, under competency D, excellent in practice, there is a requirement for all of us to do a self-assessment of our, performance and our learning, and to develop a professional development plan. So that's a requirement that we all should be doing in one form or another. The board hasn't required it up to this point. So we are going to be moving to a model where we will be requiring people to do a self-assessment and a professional development plan. So we're developing some tools to assist everybody do that. So you'll have that before January, so that you'll be able to do it for renewal for next year. And again, not new to lots of people. I know Eastern Health has had one for a long time and has been waiting for it to be revised with the new competencies. So again, we have one that we're going to be using for the Atlantic provinces. So it won't be just for us, it'll be for everybody. And it's basically a self-assessment that goes through the competency document, and then you set yourself 2 learning goals, and then we'll have a log where you track that. And then we will be looking at that in the coming year. So that's kind of what's coming for the next year. So the self-assessment, the learning goals, and the logs. The log won't be a requirement for this year because you won't have anything to log unless you documented it for last year. We'll start looking kind of next year at what you looked at this year, what you said for this year. We will have an e-learning module, a national one. If you recall the one that we all did for the new competencies, there was a national module. So there is another one being developed, and it's on equity, diversity, and inclusion. It may be ready for us for our renewal this year, but we're not sure because we're not developing it. If not, it will be for the following year. So as soon as we have it, I'm gonna release it so that people can work on it, because it's a good one for, the culture, equity, and justice domain, which is new in our competency document. Because we're moving forward with our continuing competency kind of program and committee, with the self-assessment and the learning goals being kind of our first required step, we are putting a call out for our competency committee to kind of help us move forward with kind of the next steps and how this program is going to roll out over the next couple of years. So for someone who's interested or wants to have a hand in how this rolls out and looks, please respond to the call when it comes out, because we certainly love to have a variety of different people involved in this kind of initiative. And I have to say, we usually get people when we put a call out for our committees and stuff, so we're always thankful for that. And questions about the competency? No one's asleep, which is good.
Too cold.
Too cold. I might ask for that. No.
So this is a question that maybe jointly answer between yourself and Margie. So I guess this year is our year to be doing our self-assessment for Margie. Well, it's not just for Margie.
Yeah.
It's all because we knew this was gonna happen.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm wondering. So are we gonna do two different ones, or is what the board's gonna put out, can we submit that professional development plan to Margie as like our self-assessment or like?
It's fine by me.
It does make sense if people are gonna have to do one. We're saying this is gonna be ready for January and do one on the next 2 months.
Yeah.
So much time to do it.
That's what we're just
We're
thinking,
all like,
we're not doing it twice.
It might be ready sooner,
Yeah, ready for the soon.
As soon as the-
Is it ready to do, people are doing the documents or waiting or, office is it really close?
It's really close. Yeah.
So, yes, so since it'll be, part of the requirement for the board, is that gonna be an annual requirement?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
You actually do more.
What's that, we're gonna be doing it more. But I guess then what I'm wondering is Margie, and maybe you haven't figured this out yet, is that something that you still like for us to send to you in addition to the board? Like if we continue to use the
That's
board
an
stuff.
interesting comment. So professional practice and some of the other, professions, once it became a board requirement, it didn't, we could back away from it as an employer requirement, because we were kind of, it's part of it, we want that, and it's also actually built into liability, right? We want to ensure that people are doing this, as part of our own, but now we know you're doing it because it's built into your
So
licensing
you won't need to
requirement.
then.
So it may not be something that we will need to track, actually, if there was any reason, we could call up the licensing body and see who they complete at that particular year or whatever. But I would consult, within our department about what. Psychology in particular, if it's full of, in particular, that's very kind of, we might do audits, so we might look at different ways to do that.
So, to clarify.
Let's do on Monday, Kathy. Let's do on Monday.
Pause the December deadline.
I want some of your clinic lead to email all this, I remember all the stuff, so we'll just make it formal track. And that will also help me move this forward with some decision making.
Sounds great.
And because some other areas are really too, I don't think, we probably are not mentioning about practices.
I knew it was gonna generate a little excitement.
Excitement.
You're welcome, Patty. And we're aiming to get those tools done ASAP, so they might be done next week. We're with Nova Scotia, so I can't kind of say that. Yeah. Any other questions about anything, anybody? All right, well, thank you very much for your attention.
All right, we're just going to.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll go right on into the next on the agenda is the panel. So initially the idea for the panel was to have updates from all the different regions. It's going to play out a little bit differently today. So what's going to happen is we're going to have Patty do an update on field work, then Kenneth is going to do an update for Lab Grenfell, and then Margie is going to do some updates from a PPC perspective. All right, so we're going to start with Patty. So I gotta do your bio. So Patty Morris has been working as an occupational therapist in Newfoundland since 1990. After graduating from Queen's University, as a clinician, she has worked in most practice areas in Newfoundland, including pediatrics, adult, rural, remote acute care, community, and long-term care. She returned to school in 2018 part-time and graduated with a post-professional master's degree in 2022. Currently, Patty holds 2 part-time roles with the Workforce Planning Division of Health and Community Services. One of these positions is Provincial OT Fieldwork Coordinator, where she has a role in introducing prospective students to a career in OT and in coordinating placements for OT and OTA students across the province. The second role, Provincial HSPNet Practice Education Coordinator, involves working to improve provincial placement coordination and processes for all of our health education programs in Newfoundland. Thank you. And if you want a laser, you can push that little.
Thank you, everyone. So my presentation is very quick. What I'd like to do is leave you all with an impression or a renewed understanding that we all have a role to play in ensuring a sustainable workforce excuse me, for occupational therapy in our province. So I'm the one who gets paid the big bucks to do the coordination piece, but I cannot work in isolation. So that's the key message I'm hoping people are going to take away. And it's very quick. So some of you may see yourselves in some of the photos because the photos that I used are student focused. I think Maria might see herself in one of these ones on the first page. So again, I'm going to talk about the roles of the Provincial OT Fieldwork Coordinator within the health workforce planning realm, and talk about how you also can be part of fieldwork. Wow. So just a little perspective on what my role is. So I report to the Senior Manager of Health Workforce Planning at the Department of Health and Community Services. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about this role, which has been in place since 1982 or 1983, so it's not something that was just developed overnight. I don't work for Dalhousie, I work with Dalhousie. I kind of work for MUN because my office is located at MUN, so there's certainly some nice a relationship with Memorial, but my employer and the people that I report to are the Health Workforce Planning at the Department of Health. And the key roles, sorry, I have a frog in my throat. The key roles that I play are around student recruitment and academic advising, fieldwork placement recruitment, as well as preceptor orientation support. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how you can also have a role in some of those functions. Thank you. So the goal of this position that I'm very, very fortunate to have been in since 2015 is the ultimate goal really is just to ensure that we have a supply of OTs to come take care of us when we need care, or our family members or our children need care as a citizen of the province. As I said, this work cannot and is not done in isolation,
And the success of the coordinator position is really based on partnerships with everybody here in this room and all the other 200-ish OTs that are in our province, because I think if we got 50 or so in the room. Kim, what's this year's enrollment, registration? Okay, so pretty close. And there's many, many opportunities to become involved. I also would like to say that this role, the fieldwork coordinator role, is a very unique one. I think it's the only role like this in the country. It's not full-time, as I said, it's a part-time role, but it was created in the early 80s when the Dow School of OT was created, and because we didn't have our own school here, it was meant to bridge communication with Dalhousie for people in the province and to bring prospective OTs that are trained outside of the province at Dalhousie back here to work. So I don't know, and if anyone knows of, comes from a different province and knows something, that there's a similar role, I'd love to get that person's phone number, because yeah, there's benefits in being the only one doing the work, but you know, it's hard to do it again in isolation. Hence the reason for reminding you all that I need everybody's help. So a little, just some, again, from the update piece, a few things that I've been involved in or things that are happening. Those of you who've been around a while will remember what MedQuest and the coordinator would reach out every year and get everybody to sign up and do their sessions, and I believe that's the first time I met Ms. Christina Powell, was at the time, was through MedQuest. So we do have a role in coordinating that, and right now the model has changed. So that's a program at Memorial that brings in high school students in the summer, generally. It's become more of a hybrid or an online experience now, but we're still involved. So I just did a presentation a few weeks ago, and we're already looking to do the next one that happens. Discovery Days is something that's happening. It's sponsored by the Canadian Medical Association, and I had Olivia came to help, and I don't know if anyone else in the room came and helped last year. We did 2 workshops for, again, high school students that came from schools all around the Avalon, and we actually had OT students were here on placement at the time, so they came and helped out in the workshop, and it was a lot of fun, and I think it was more meaningful for the high school students to have people that were closer in age and similar experience than old people telling them. I do the graduate career fair. So this year, Allison came and helped. Lois Chafe also volunteered, and I've had other people around the room come and help out for that session as well. So that's where we're meeting with university students. So those students who are currently in a bachelor program or looking to do a master's program. That's always a fun day. We're now involved in a high school careers roadshow, so some of you may be approached. This is in partnership with Newfoundland Labrador Health Services, with the unions, whereby each region of the province, NLHS has identified the top 5 areas of vacancies in their area in terms of the health workforce. So there's going to be a roadshow where workers that are in closer proximity to each of the high schools that have been identified are going to be asked to come in and talk about a day in the life of. So OTs are going to be involved in a couple of them. There's physio, psychologists, there's lots of different workforce needs. So, but we're part of that planning. I've been developing some kind of social media. If I had the laser thing, let's see if that works. There it is. Ooh. I partnered with the graphics people at the medical school in their IT department, and we got graphics that are shareable for Facebook and Instagram and whatever the other things are that's on social media. So I think I might have sent them to Jess to share for something. But they're available if you folks are asked to do something in your area, or asked to go out and do a presentation for high school, because I think Tanya Kenny recently did something for her child's high school, and so you can certainly use, I can share these materials for sharing, and there's a banner, a nice pretty tall banner that I think there were pictures of that Jess did share on the NLAOT social media platforms. We are also working to develop, oopsie, don't want to give away all the secrets there. This idea of having a pamphlet for students, we're now working to brand that in on Work in Health NL. Work in Health NL, that's the website that Workforce and the Office of Recruitment and Retention is using for promoting health careers in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I've sent them this homemade one, and so keep an eye out that there's going to be some professionally developed resources, information around occupational therapy that folks can be able to download from the Work in Health website. So that's enough of that. So there's a few things I've been up to in the student recruitment side of things. Oh, academic advising happens all the time, so I meet with students. I may have met with some of you in the room. I'm probably not currently here now, but you know, students that are just doing a bachelor or whatever at one, I often have students come by my office, or we have a chat about what a career in OT might look like. This brings us to what most people know about the position. I'm not going to go into all the needs for placements now, except that I'm looking for placements. 6111, that's the January placement. The matching is happening, if it hasn't happened already, it's happening very soon. Still looking for offers for the final placement, which is March, April, and still looking for offers for the first year placement, and still looking for offers for the OTA program at College of North Atlantic. So if anyone's interested, who has already offered to take a student this year? Ooh, lots of hands. Love to see that. Okay, so still need more. There's still time. If you're interested, what I try to do is we do the round, and then if there's students who really need to go to Clarenville because whatever reason, or really want to go to Lab City, I can after come back and do an extra ask. But we're now in the first round of just seeing what's out there, and even if it's a part-time, maybe it's a project, things like that. So those are all still really important. The other piece that my position is involved is, and this is kind of one of the pieces that I've built in myself because I think it's really important, is when you know all the work going into recruiting all these preceptors is saying thank you. So I handed out a few letters this morning. Oh gosh, here we go. Handed out a few letters from for any preceptor from last year. Paula Rushton, the director of the OT school, has written a letter of thanks. So I've been tasked with, and gladly so, to hand them out, and where possible I'm trying to do it in person. So some of you got them today, some of them I hand delivered at the Janeway. It's kind of when time allows. So and with that is a lovely sign that you can post in your area and share with your managers and your team members to say, wow, this is a teaching site for Dalhousie University. So if anyone if you received one as being a preceptor last year and you want more than one, just let me know because I have extras. And the last thing I'm going to talk to you about is something that we're working on in my other role, but it does relate to this one, around saying thank you, is a preceptor appreciation campaign. So we're working with the same group that's doing those handouts that I mentioned for OT, and developing some tools that can be used by schools or by employers that are nice and easy and professionally done, nicely done, to say thank you. So I'm hoping that that's going to happen sooner than later. We've actually met with the PR group and we got some nice ideas. So stay tuned for that. But again, that's something that I'm very involved in developing behind the scenes. So I'm going to leave you with two questions. One is why I'm often, and I want you to think about these and maybe send me an email sometime, or we'll call up and we'll go out and we'll have a cup of tea or something. What, for those of you that raised your hand and have been a preceptor, I'm really interested in knowing why. What is it about that experience that encourages people to raise their hand and become involved? And if that hasn't happened, if you haven't felt the spirit move in that way, I'm also interested in why not. You know, are there things that we should do differently? Are there different supports perhaps that you would like? Are there incentives or other recognition? You know, with those types of things, is that impacting your reasoning for being part of a preceptorship or you know, fostering student learning? You know, I'm interested in thinking, well, how would that make a difference? So, you know, I'm really always interested in those kinds of, you know, learning from you folks and partnering. And then if there's something that you're really thinking that is, you know, could be a facilitator or a barrier, then it gives us something concrete that we can do some working on. So again, show of hands of who has been a preceptor. Okay, and I'd like to see another show of hands of who could be a preceptor, and I'm hoping to see everybody's hand. Because again, as I said, clue up now, there's a role for everyone, and I just love hearing from you all, and please reach out if you have a question or if you're able to volunteer for, or if you have a suggestion. Questions? Yes, again. I really don't know. I know it's in the works. The last update I had on that would have been at the CAOT conference, so I have not heard. I don't know if you have, Nikki? No.
Can you say what it is just for people online?
Oh, sorry, Kim asked about the new fieldwork evaluation tool and when it's going to be available. So some of you may not know that there is a new one being developed. There is, but I have no expected date on when that's going to be available or used. Any other questions? Yes, Jess?
I just have a reflection. So I'm going into my 5th year of practice now and would love to be a preceptor, but I haven't been able to secure contract for longer than a year. So it's kind of like, I feel like there are a lot of folks who want to be preceptors, but just can't be because of the way like the systems are. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to make that reflection because I think there are a lot of us that would.
Absolutely, and I do hear that often, and my response to that is, well, look around you, and if there is your coworker or colleague in whatever area you find yourself working has a student, maybe you can offer to come with me for a day. Or why don't you, spend a few hours, or, or maybe your coworker needs to have some time off for, maybe to have other things happening, so you can step in and help out in the immediate term, rather than, planning a year ahead that you're going to have somebody full time. Kayla, I believe, had her hand up next.
Is there a place where we can actually track our currency hours?
Your online profile, you report your currency hours every year, so you can track it in there.
The question was about tracking currency hours.
Well, you can track what you put in, so once a year you have to put in how many hours you worked the previous year. That's what's there.
Was your question more, how do you track it?
Yeah.
Because of your full-time is 1950, isn't it?
Yeah, so I guess if you're, so depending on what it is, if you need to track, you do contract work probably, or you do different, you probably need to keep track your hours worked to be able to see what that it needs to say, right? Is that right? And but for a full-time employee within that public system, that's 1,950 hours. But depending on if you're in another position, your yearly hours may look different. Some places it's 1,720, some places it's, whatever. So you need to know what it is for where you're working, right? Yeah.
And I think I saw, okay, Patty? Yeah.
I was just wondering, the high school career fair, do you know if it's coming out to be around
I'm pretty sure it is, but I don't have the list of, if you're interested, send me an email and I'll let you know. I have the list, but I don't remember. It's a lot of schools. And Margie?
I just want to thank you.
Oh,
for all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you.
Do my work without you, or we could have OTs without all the work that you do. You're so passionate about it. And then thanks, because I think you did a lot of work this last fall, which translates into, I'll be reaching out for a lot of people who do job chatting. If you've gotten emails.
Just a few.
Just a few, and so to thank you for stepping up to the plate, because I think that does make a difference to people, so.
I forgot to talk about job shadowing, that's, yeah, I'm surprised I forgot that. But thank you, okay, is that everybody have more questions? Thank
These are not put in order by Danielle Hogan.
They're in order.
I'll be having that now.
Thank you very much. All right, so our next speaker is Kenneth. So Kenneth Curtis has been with the Labrador Grenfell Zone since 2017, working throughout the region to expand OT services and maintain workflow. Kenneth travels between each major site at least a couple times a year and occasionally visits the coastal Labrador sites for satellite support as needed. Kenneth describes his team as small but wonderful and always appreciates visitors. And a fun fact, he was president of NLAOT before me. So everything I've learned, good or bad, has been from Kenneth.
Alright, hello everyone, thank you for having me. For anyone who hasn't been up to the Labrador area before, our zone has 3 major sites, and we actually got 2 pretty cool milestones recently. So for the first time in a very long time, we are fully staffed. And the second thing is, we have double-digit numbers for the very first time for OTs as of next month. So as of next month, we'll have 10 OTs, or well, actually 11, because one position is job shared. So I think that's a big shout out to, like, our services are definitely expanding up there, and I think the overall what we can provide is a big leap forward. On that note, 3 of our new positions are on the family care team. So we have one at each major site. So in Lab West and Goose Bay. So if you've ever been to the area, Lab West Health Center for Lab City, Labrador Health Center for Goose Bay, and then the Curtis Memorial Hospital for St. Anthony. So we have a new OT on each family care team there for each site. Every one of our sites are quite different in terms of their population and their needs. So we're really going to be reaching out for guidance on the family care team piece on how those positions evolve and work throughout the regions. For our generalists, we do end up, I think, doing a little bit more pediatrics just because we don't have a Janeway outreach position for Lab Grenfell. So all of our generalists, for the most part, work with every age, birth to death. So it's tough, but it also keeps it interesting and keeps us as sharp as we can be. Just a little bit about lab services in general. We do take self-referrals if there's anything coming to our region. So if you have a client transferring, if you don't know the OT, just pop me an email and then I'll connect you with the OT up in our zone. We do use a lot of telehealth just because if you've never been through, so there's more than 500 kilometers between each hospital. So for us, it's a struggle up in the Labrador zone to even get from site to site. You often have like a full day of driving time or quite an extensive flight to get from hospital to hospital. So we do use a lot of telehealth in our zone. For wait times, I figured each zone was going to come in and do like a little overview like this. So I don't know, it might just be us, but yeah, for inpatient services, we're usually same day, all the way up to, I'd say for pediatrics, we're about 3 to 12 months, depending on the site. So a little bit longer on that side. We do appreciate all the visitors from the specialty services, like the Miller Center Podiatry Clinic and the Janeway. So any bit of extra support always makes a big difference to us, because up in the Lab Grenfell zone, sometimes we don't get to see OTs very often. So there might be one to 3 OTs in each area, so we're few and far between. So the visitors are very much appreciated. In terms of other different services, so we do have a Home First team as well. I sit on that for Labrador Grenfell. Sounds like it's a little bit different between the zones, but we do our best to support our clients through an OT lens on that as well. And in the Labrador zone in particular, some of the struggles that we have ongoing, and we often look to the other zones to see how you guys do it, to see if we can improve our quality of service. Equipment is a really big one. So anything for loans, we recently lost our last Red Cross site, so pretty much all of our equipment loans now is coming from within hospital. So it puts a burden on our frontline staff to provide that service. And shipping too. So a lot of times when we have an urgent need, our sites won't have it, and we have to wait 3-4 weeks sometimes for equipment to get up there. So it's a bit of a different site to work if you ever have a chance to come up. On that note, we do get locums come up a lot for some coverage and some specialty support. So it's a unique place to work, and we have some unique challenges up there. Within our zone, doing travel is also quite difficult too. So on that note, sometimes we pull up locums or use some telehealth to fill the gap. But otherwise, I think things in the Labrador-Grenfell zone for OT have a bright future, and I think things are moving forward really well.
Wonderful.
Any questions about OT up my way?
Okay, did you want to just briefly touch on your presentation at the Health Innovation Summit?
Oh, sure. So the emails came out a couple months ago about the Health Innovation Summit, just to see if there was any barriers within our workplaces where we could see an innovative idea, something related to technology to fill in a gap. It was a little bit of in my head there for a while, but if you've ever heard of it, telepresence robotics. So basically, it's you know how we use Teams and Zooms now for if we're seeing a client from afar. Telepresence robots are basically like an iPad on a telescopic rod or stick on wheels. So you can log into one of these devices remotely, and you can drive the telepresence robot anywhere into the site. There's some barriers like elevators and doors and stuff that can't get through. But as long as you or the floors in some of our sites too, which are could use some repair. But as long as you've got an accessible place to drive a robot, you can drive it to a room, to a clinic, to anywhere on a ward, and you can do an encrypted call just like you would on Zoom, pretty autonomously from another site. So the price range on them was pretty approachable as well for some of the basic models that have been used in healthcare settings in the States for a couple of years now. Mostly on the nursing front, but I think it has a really big potential for some of our more rural sites. And not just within our site too, but if you've got a client who transferred back or you're more of a specialty service doing a check-in with one of the clients up in our zone, I don't think it will be a stretch for you to be able to log into one of the robots and either drive autonomously to see the client or have a staff on site who could facilitate that interaction. But so I presented this pitch at the Innovation Conference, and I had some of our management team reach out after and want to pursue this as a pilot. So I think we're gonna try it over the next year, see if we can get one of the basic models and collect some data, maybe some videos, pictures on how it was used within the zone, and hopefully it's a net cost savings overall, and just another tool that we can use at our disposal with Teams and Zoom to provide that service.
Make sure that robot gets his vulnerable sector check, though.
It's pretty cool, and they range from about $4,000 to $25,000. But some of the higher end models, they were actually built by clinicians. So every feature and stuff on it is designed for what you would need in a healthcare setting. So yeah, you get what you pay for, it sounds like, with them, but definitely looking forward to something to try within our zone.
Cool.
Any questions?
So you had to, so the healthcare core, the presentation you had to come up with the idea. That's what the whole conference was? People were bringing new, innovative ideas?
Yeah, there was 8 or 10 people, I think, got picked to just go and pitch their idea for something that you found as a problem that could be addressed with a new solution on your site. So again, travel up in our zone is very difficult, unreliable, especially for 8 months of the year when there's snow. And the ferry too, because you have to connect to get across to the Labrador site. So getting around is pretty unreliable for part of the year, and this is one more tool that we could use at our disposal to keep service continuity.
Dragons, it's like Dragon stand for healthcare. It's your idea.
Yeah. I'm surprised it hasn't been already in place, but I didn't think the idea would go anywhere, but a couple weeks later they let me know that you're up.
Wow.
That's good. It's good.
Good for you, Phil. I'm not gonna open. It doesn't matter. We should have did like presidents. All right. Last file there. Okay, so up next we have Margie Collingwood. So Margie is an OT with over 30 years of experience. She has a Bachelor of Science in OT from Dalhousie University and a Master of Employment Relations from MUN, as well as a Certified Health Executive from the Canadian College of Health Leaders. She's a Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services Professional Practice Consultant for OT. Her passions include her family, biking, skiing, and music. Come on up. Do you have a slideshow or not? You have a slideshow?
Slideshow.
So we asked her last night at 6 o'clock.
Email at 10:07 yesterday. So I think this is really just to give a really quick overview of NLHS and probably the professional practice very kind of quickly. So we're restructuring, as you know, so that there's been an existing professional practice department within the Eastern Urban and Eastern Rural Zone. For anyone who doesn't understand, there are 5 zones now within Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services. So Eastern Urban, Eastern Rural, Central, Western, and Labrador Grenville. We're taking the Department of Professional Practice is now going to expand, and that consists of professional practice consultants for all our regulated professions. So that would be occupational therapy, physiotherapy, social work, psychology, dietitians, speech language pathologists, and audiologists, nursing. I feel like I might be forgetting a team member. I'm looking at Susan and Q. I think I said clinical nutrition.
Therapeutic recreation.
No. Therapeutic recreation. They were under my portfolio, but they're considered non-regulated. So in the decision to expand to provincial oversight, I will no longer be, and they no longer are within the professional practice department or represented by the professional practice department. So yeah, that's a question. So Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services, I'm mindful of the fact that this is NLAOT, and there's 260, I guess, licensed professionals, but around just over 200, I'm going to say maybe 205 work within the public sector. So, 80% of the licensed practitioners do work for Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services. So our structure will be that those allied health professional practice consultants will be provincial. We've known this since, I guess, the spring, but what that's going to look like as we expand across the province is we're just starting to develop that role. I think occupational therapy, like we always are, have been kind of leaders. And maybe actually probably might have started with Ken when you started in Lab Brain. You kind of reached out and wanted to be with the clinical lead group in Eastern Health, and I was like, sure, it's really dominated by Eastern townies, but join us and see what you can learn, But within that kind of expanded, and so we've actually had a provincial clinical lead group now pretty strong for about 2 years, and it has kind of evolved to kind of focus more on shared provincial topics, just on its own. So it's kind of nice to see. I'm already seeing some really good doc connections, like we're building the family care team, we're gonna have a community practice group, already talked about it. One of our challenges is documentation and forms, and LabGrant again reached out to us, but I actually, when talking, it's like, actually, you might have the forms that will work better because of the generalist kind of structure that you work in. So we're actually gonna look more at those forms and see if they're gonna work for the family care. So it's gonna be kind of interesting, connect dots. And I see a big part of my role as we move forward and we get broader and bigger, probably being what Carrie is. I think I'm gonna be doing a lot of poke. I can see that a big piece of what I'm going to be doing is going to be that type of role as we move forward. I've been sitting next to Nikki, and she's kind of said to me a few times, "Right, you seem to know all this stuff, right?" And I said, and you know, it just made me think. I only know a lot of things because everyone is so open and shares things with me, and I know I get you guys, and I just want to thank you. I'll send out these random emails and out across the province, and it could be these really weird questions. Do you do this? Do you have that form? And people are excellent at kind of seeing this email from me and responding when they can. So I kind of look like I know what I'm doing or I know what's happening, but it's just because I reach out to all of you and you're so quick in your responses and give me the information. So I really I appreciate that. So I'm really looking forward to learning all the different practice perspectives and stuff. And that's kind of where it is. I don't know if anyone has any questions, burning questions.
So, like, eventually with Newfoundland Labrador Health Services, I don't know if you can answer this, but
Yeah.
like for the FAC teams, like will it eventually be so that our practice group can have like Gander and Grand Falls and Labrador? Like will it ever be?
You know, I've already kind of pushed that, you know, kind of envelope. So the structure, and it's kind of confusing, I don't know if anyone's aware, but within the new health report, we have what's called strategic health networks. And there's going to be 12 strategic health networks, and they're going to be looking at key areas that the health report wants to address. So for example, there is a strategic health network for primary care. There's a strategic health network that just has its director now for mental health. So they're going to set some of those directions on, okay, so are all our FAC teams going to kind of join together? Or they're setting, but it's high level decisions, like so around, you know, family care teams, it's even just what are the position descriptions for the occupational therapist, dietitian, and the physician. So they're being at really high level. So to your question, we're already pushing the envelope the other direction, like we're creating our community practice for family care teams. No one in the strategic health network for primary care has said that. No one's really reached out to me, but we as a community of OTs, that's what we do. So I'd like to say, you know what, this just kind of gives us that checklist permission that if we want all our FAC team OTs together to talk and share stuff across the province, I'd say let's go for it. And I think we're actually just being kind of setting the stage and probably being the leader for doing some of that, pulling it together a little bit more. So that's, yeah.
Like we already
Go
share
for it.
resources, but
Yeah.
we're not in like,
It's
I
not
don't know if I
formalized.
can put you in the teams group because it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So stuff like
yeah,
that. but-
yeah. So we're, you know, we're starting with primary care, but there's like there's a strategic health network for seniors, for seniors care. You know, there's a whole long list of that group, and they're even trying to work out what they're doing. So, any more questions? So, you know, I didn't know why, Patty had a question?
Yeah, I can just add this, I'm just curious, I guess, in the past, in your role in Eastern Health, you've been involved with interviews, I guess casual lists, those sort of things. Is that still something that's gonna come under your umbrella now, or?
That's probably up for negotiation, because that's one of the pieces that we're seeing that across the province to be able to do those interviews, you know, at a low level may not occur, but at the same time, in this stage, we don't have an answer for who's going to do them or what that's gonna look like. So we're certainly in like a kind of transition. So I think we're gonna kind of see it, like I think in the leads sit in on some of the occupational therapy interviews. But if you talk to our group in Eastern, they'll say, well, unionized staff members shouldn't be in on an interview. So I think it's at their level that they're gonna have to set some of that direction on what that's gonna be, because, so the practice is different, the job descriptions are different, the qualifications are actually different. So when I say it's probably gonna be really high-level decisions, you gotta get your job description down pat, your qualifications, your posting, we already got that United HR platform now, that I don't think anyone knows how to use it, but right? So that's the first start, so then you're gonna start to see things fall into place. So that's a decision, is a good, excellent, question, or, yeah.
I know in the past, I say in our area, in the rural zone, that used to be the way, right? The team lead was a part of the
Yeah.
interviewing process. And, yeah, they were more on the ground, so I'm just curious if that's gonna come back to that model.
Yeah, so it'll probably be a bit more of a process decision around can someone like sit in, or what would that look like, right? But
Just, again, be able to answer those professional practice questions that people have around, or I know we've had this conversation with our manager just this week about, for her as she's dietitian trained, but then if she's asking questions about for a social worker in a social work interview, having that professional practice input, in the past, they would just, had more professional practice there at the interview stage, but is that actually going to be something that'll happen now with this provincial mandate?
yeah, I don't really know the answer, but yeah, still lots of questions. I wanted to just take 5 more minutes of your time. I didn't really know why I was coming here, so I thought I could have a topic. So, I did wanna throw out there, that one of our, our new competency document, because I wouldn't be the professional practice consultant without touching on that. And as a leader, just a, small piece of role modeling. On the day of the Truth and Reconciliation, I was invited to a book launch. And the book launch was actually a book launch for the book called Beothic. I don't know if anyone's really aware of this story, but I just thought it was really, really fascinating. And it's the, I guess, controversy or the story that the Beothic are not extinct. So this is kind of my latest new journey that I thought I'd just throw out there and be a little bit vulnerable, that it is quite a controversial topic, as you can imagine, in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. But here's the book. I brought the book with me. I kind of actually like the title. And it was really quite fascinating. It was written by Chris Patrick Aylward, who is a very embedded white settler, redheaded, privileged family in Newfoundland and Labrador. But this was his PhD theses on exploring that. And I guess the premise of it, because I felt, is that so much of our narrative has been based on European writers, and that we really haven't capitalized on the stories and the storytelling traditions of particularly our Mi'kmaq here in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And it was really interesting how people just share. So the next day I was so fascinated by this. It was actually quite a controversial meeting. There was people who got up and talked about it, and how our local university is not supporting some of this research. So it's because our provincial narrative has not been this, right? And I'm not really making a stance. So for me, it's about reading and learning. But the next day I just happened to share this story, and I think it's about sharing your experiences. And I was in a meeting with 3 other people, and one of them was an occupational therapist, and the person shared that they were a Mi'kmaq, and they only learned that when they were a teenager, and they went on to tell the story, oh yeah, well that's a big thing in our community. If you were in our community and you were tall, we just looked at you and said, you're Beothic. And I was like, I've never heard this tale before. It was such a fascinating thing for someone to share, just for me kind of sharing my new learning and stuff. So I just wanted to share that with everyone else, and I just wanted to read just a little passage from it. So, conceding that the Beothic language and culture have disappeared, Scott Garner, who's one of the academics, feels the use of the term extinction functions to overlook or downplay the Beothic ancestry of present-day descendants. As a culture, materially, linguistically, the Beothic are extinct. With regard to bloodline, no, definitely not. Beothuk are alive and well amongst us. Chief Measle Joe, which many of you would know, insists that the Beothuk people cannot be considered extinct as their descendants continue to live on the population of Newfoundland and Labrador. So I just thought this was really a fascinating sharing that I wanted to throw out there. And if anyone's interested in the book or wants to read it, that's my little Truth and Reconciliation journey is always through reading. That's it. Thank you very much. All right, last call for coloring sheets before Emily does the closing. I'm collecting them right now, and then at the end of her talk, the winners are going to be announced.
Well, let me call the sheets. Color sheets. Okay, a couple more minutes and then we're all done. I'm just going to give a couple of closing remarks and a couple of thank yous, okay?
All right. Ready?
Ready. I will be the first one to admit I was skeptical we could pull this off today. I imagined a room with 9 of us at this table and Margie at this table. But here we are, and 46 OTs gave up their Saturday to be here today. And we'd firstly like to thank you all for that. Thank you for your interest, thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting the first ever NLAOT Summit. This summit was the brainchild of a pregnant Maria Snow. She spent so much time and effort organizing this, mostly while caring for a newborn baby, who you may not have realized she actually left the room to feed at one point today. Thank you to Maria, thank you to baby Jasper.
Thank you, Jasper.
The education component, including yesterday's workshop, was organized by our education chair, Samantha Ash, who also deserves a huge thank you. Sam is beyond organized and very passionate about continued education for OT, something which the rest of us are benefiting from with her as our education chair. Her committee is always looking for volunteers. If anyone is interested, there is a sign-up sheet by the coffee. Thank you to Jess Sampson for her design and OT visions. She spent more time than any of us working with Maria to make this event happen. The rest of your executive, Jess Kiley, Megan, Danielle, Kathy, and myself, helped out in a variety of ways, and I truly believe we could not have done this without all of us coming together and spending, arguably, too much of our free time working on this project.
You forgot Nicole.
And Nicole. Thank you to Dallas School of Occupational Therapy for the morning break, for collaborating with us to bring the Kelly Bang lecture to the summit. Thank you to Nikki for spending a rainy weekend in Newfoundland. Congratulations to Carrie Chambers on being awarded the Kelly Bang lectureship, and thank you to Carrie for being a Newfoundland OT superstar. Thank you to all the speakers today. I understand there may have been some bribery involved, and we appreciate that that tactic worked. Thank you to the event staff at the Holiday Inn and for Signal Digital Media for our tech support throughout the day. The money we spent on the last 2 days is NLAOT's money, meaning it is your money. We aim to produce an event that would interest as much of our membership as possible, and we hope that we provided that. As an executive, we made the decision to spend money on this due to the surplus of money that exists from multiple COVID years of very little spending. This event may not occur annually because it might not be financially feasible, and we may run out of OTs to bribe to speak. But we do hope that it will occur again in some capacity. If you would like to see this offered again in the future, if you have any suggestions, please fill out the feedback form. We welcome any ideas. 2 things we wanted to mention. The NLAOT general meeting is on November 12th from 12 to 1:30. There's a change to the dates for lighting up landmarks for World OT Day. St. John City Hall will be lit up tomorrow. Confederation Building will not be lit up until Monday. Finally, I would like to thank you all again for being here, and to the 75 of you who participated yesterday in Adam's workshop. We will be meeting at the upstairs of the Newfoundland Embassy on the corner of Queen Street and New Gower tonight at 7 o'clock. There will be complimentary snack foods and a cash bar. We hope to see you there. Happy OT month, and thank you.
And now to Megan for the prestigious coloring contest award. Is you sure? You won. Okay, we'll get another one then, because it was picked randomly, because anyway, we didn't have anything all figured out how we would do it. So, the winner is Kayla Warren and Maria Rideout. And they only come in one size. And we hope to see everybody tonight. Thank you all very much. Feedback forms will be sent to your email in the coming week.